So I checked into the art fair, pulled up to my booth spot, and instantly realized that this was going to be horrible for my sales. The location had so many problems with it. If you've ever tried to sell your art at art fairs, then you know your booth location could mean everything. It could mean you'd have amazing sales or horrible sales. And we had driven 5 hours to be able to do this event. The booth costs were really high. I also have costs to pay for my art assistant who helps me do the shows because I'm disabled and I can't lift over 5 pounds, and setting up the booths takes a person who can do hard labor, lifting lots of weight, like around 40 pounds, to lift my weight bags and place them on the tent and everything. Because at art shows, we're setting up the entire tent. I mean, we go there, the street is an empty street, and we erect everything that's going to be there. And so it takes somebody who can do some serious labor. And yeah, that's not me. So I have to pay somebody to go with me. And I also, of course, have all the costs of all the products and things that I'm selling in my booth, like my art prints and canvas prints and original paintings. And in addition to this, there are hotel bills, which the hotel rates keep going up and up. And then there are a few meals that I purchase out while we're on the road. In total, for this show, my costs were around $1,700. This may sound like a lot, but this is the typical cost for a show that's a larger show. Now, these types of shows, I expect to make at least $8,000 and hopefully $10,000 in total sales at the show to make it really worth my time. And if I don't make that much, then it's like, why did I pay out all of this money and travel so far to be able to go to it? Now, that's my bar for success. Not every artist is going to need to make that much at every show. Sometimes artists that live in the area, so then they can do shows where they make a little less money because they don't have to pay hotels, or perhaps they don't have to pay labor like I do. But for me, I kind of need to make that much to have it be worth my time. I always request a corner booth at shows because I find that I sell better with a corner. It gives me a little bit more exposure because when people are walking up to the booth, they can see my art on 2 different sides of the booth. That just gives people a little more time to see me amidst everything else that they're seeing at the show. And sometimes that few extra seconds that a person is exposed to my art is all that it takes to get them to be able to enter my booth and then eventually purchase. And without them entering my booth, there's no chance to get them to purchase, right? So the first step in any successful art fair business is to get those people who are just walking by to come inside so that you can try to convince them to shop either with your art, the way it looks like it's something that they've always been wanting in their home, or maybe your salesmanship, maybe a little bit of both. The big problem with this booth spot was that my corner, which I paid extra for when I signed up for the show to ensure that I would be able to get the corner spot, they were $100 extra. So the corner spot that I was given was set back from everyone else in the row of artists. And to try to give you a full picture of this, there was a row of artists, right? And most of the row was out sitting on the actual street, but there were parking spots that kind of jutted up about 12 feet behind the rest of the people in the row. And so 4 or 5 of us there were stuck back in this row that was far behind everybody else. So when people entered the event, they were out here walking along the street, seeing the artists. And then my group of artists were way back in here. And this doesn't seem like it would be a huge issue on the surface because people could just walk further toward my booth and the other people's booths that were set back, and then they could see our work. But people oftentimes don't do that. They just kind of follow what everybody else does. And if the crowd is just walking out there straight and they're not walking back to our booths, then they're just going to follow what everybody else does. It's kind of like a herd mentality. And I'm not trying to down the general public or say anything negative, but this is just something that I see that happens at shows. The other thing is, since my booth was set so far back, you couldn't even see my sidewall. I had people coming up and I would have to tell them to go look at the pieces on the side of my booth because they wouldn't even think that there was anything hanging over there because it didn't seem like it was a corner booth at all. It seemed like an inline booth. And it made me so mad because I had paid extra for this booth that was supposed to give me the adequate exposure that I knew I needed so that I could pay for all the costs that I had in the show. Because when you're thinking about doing a show and you're planning all this out, and you know you have $1,700 worth of costs, then everything has to fall in line from a planning standpoint for you to be able to make the money. And I know that I need to have a corner booth that gives me adequate exposure to be able to hit the $8,000 to $10,000 $10 range in my total sales volume. If I have an inline booth, I might get 5,000 or 6,000, but that corner makes that much of a difference for me. And so that's why I paid the extra money and I was willing to do the show, because honestly, I would not have done the show if I knew all I could get was an inline booth, because it wouldn't have been worth it for me from a profitability standpoint. And making the whole situation a little worse were my neighbors, because they decided that they needed to have both of their chairs out there in front of their booth. So I was getting blocked from both sides, no matter how people walked by my booth. If that's not enough bad things at an event, the event organizers decided that it was a great idea to put generators which had exhaust, like really smelly exhaust, just right upwind from my entire row of booths. And so you could smell this nasty generator exhaust the entire event. And it was making me cough, it was making my eyes water. I know it had to be bothering some of my customers as well. I mean, would you want to shop in a booth that smelled like nasty diesel exhaust? No. But with art fairs, you have to be adaptable. This is one of the biggest lessons that I learned early on. And you can't let a lot of things that are stacked against you stop you from making sales and keeping a good attitude and everything, because if you have a bad attitude, you're definitely not going to make sales. Aside from trying to have a positive attitude, some of the other things that I did to make people see my booth was make sure that I had my big sign up in front. It says Animal Art Safari. It's a hot pink background, so it really stands out against buildings or blue sky, anything people see. And when you're looking at my booth from 12 feet away, like most of the people were, that sign would grab their attention. They could see it better than a lot of the artwork I had hanging in my booth. But another thing that I did was make sure to put some large pieces on the front French walls that I have on my booth. Those walls, they're little 3 feet walls that I keep on both sides. They're called French walls. If you've never heard of that kind of thing before, you can add them onto Easy Ups or the Flourish Trim Line Tint. The thing I like about the French door walls is it gives me a space that's at the front of my booth to hang those big pieces and then bring people up to look at more of the smaller things that I have inside, and especially the prints in my print bin. Another thing that I did was have my big price sign on the front. Now, some artists don't like to have a big price sign, especially if your prices are higher. But since my prices are on the low end of everything that's always at an art fair, then I needed to promote that. So I made sure my big price sign was out there so people would see it from a distance and then come to my booth because they wanted to get something that was affordable. I also, as politely as I could, asked the neighbors if they were willing to sit inside their booth or behind their booth rather than at the front, so that way they're not also blocking traffic like the other booths being further out on the opposite side of me were. As a rule of thumb, if you do see something that your neighbor's doing that is either encroaching on your booth space or causing like a traffic flow issue, causing a situation where you might not make as many sales, and if you know that's the case, there's nothing wrong with asking them to move something or change the way they're doing something. They might not comply, but you can always ask. And from my experience, it's about a 50-50 split. Sometimes people will be more than happy to accommodate any requests that you have, but other times they're like, no, I'm here to sell stuff and I really don't care about you. And hey, they're right. They can do that because we're all there to make money, and you can't stop somebody from doing something unless they're actually like damaging your property. But otherwise you can't really stop it. Usually you just have to ask and hope for the best. Another thing that helped boost my sales was customer recognition. Now, if you've never been to a particular city to sell before, you're not going to have this. But even though I hadn't sold at this event, I had sold every year there for the last 10 years at another event in the same city. So a lot of the customers who walked by recognized my art, and then they came over because they're like, hey, you're at this event now too. That's so awesome. And then they came in to shop. Without that customer recognition, I think my sales would have been down 25 or 30% lower than they were already. And I think it goes without saying, but I also told the event what I thought about where they placed my booth. The organizer couldn't really do anything to rectify the situation other than refunding my booth fee, which he did. But that $100 really doesn't make that much of a difference when you're considering I could have done a different show that weekend, that I would have had a good corner booth, and I would have made the sales that I wanted to. So it's the opportunity cost. me showing up to this event where I got a bad corner booth, it wasn't really a corner, cost me that weekend, which was a prime weekend in selling season around here, where I could have done a different show and made the money I had hoped to make at this one. Nonetheless, the show went on and I did make decent sales. I made just under $5,000 in total sales, but like I said, it wasn't what I had wanted to make at the event. But I actually feel really lucky because I talked to one of the other artists who did the event and had done several of the same events with me that season in other cities, and he sold zero, like absolutely nothing. And so he lost all of the money that he had put into his booth fee and his hotel, everything. Now, he didn't have to pay labor like I did, but he had lost all of that money. And so luckily I saw him at the next show that I did, and he had made much better sales at it and was able to recoup the money that he had lost at that prior show. But this is something that you have to realize can happen when you start doing art fairs. You can have really good sales at one show and then maybe no sales or very few sales at the next. For me, I'm kind of fortunate in the sense that I've done this for over a decade, so I can pretty much count on always making a little money on the show, even if everything is bad, from my booth placement to like the weather, anything that could occur, I always come out on it. But if I really want to have like a stellar show, like something amazing, then everything has to fall in line. Alongside factors like your booth spot and the weather, the things you can't control, there are a lot of things that you can control. Big mistakes that artists make that stop you from making sales. If you want to learn more about some of these, check out this video. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helps. See you next time.